I believe in heaven and that we continue to exist after we go. And by that same token, the love that you have for someone and the love that they have for you, I don't think it really goes away. It's just, it doesn't have the same kind of expression that you did before. Because if anything, I think grief, a lot of people talk about grief being emptiness, and I think it's almost being over full. You don't have an outlet for that love to flow through, and it's finding your new normal to deal with that, I think.
My father is 83. Every morning, he sends my sister and I and all his grandchildren a good morning message. It's always something uplifting, positive, and encouraging. And it always says, "I love you." Short and sweet. We all look forward to this, and we know that Granddad won't be around forever, so we really cherish these messages of love and empowerment. My dad loves to say, "Every day is a new opportunity." And that is what he taught me my whole life. That, along with how to work smarter, how to hold family dear, and how to go after my dreams. So in his honor, I have created something new. It's called Your Positive Moment. Research clearly shows the benefits of positivity and connection. And a recent Gallup poll showed a significant percentage of the world is lonely. But with Your Positive Moment morning messages, you get directly to your phone, first thing in the morning, a message so that everyone can experience what I experience with my dad, so that you can begin every day on a high note. The message includes an affirmation, something to think about for the day to keep your mind in a high vibe, and something really simple to do, an action step to help you stack up good habits. All of this combined has the power to change your life and create high levels of gratitude and self-awareness and connection to self and others. And it's a text message. It comes directly to your phone. It's the first thing you'll see when you look at your phone. Rather than looking at something negative, you get something amazing, something really positive to start every day. Sign up for your 2-week free trial at yourpositivemoment.com. Now, enjoy this week's impactful conversation. Hello again, my friends. Today's guest is finally ready to tell his story publicly in the hope that his tragedy can help others who might have experienced difficulty in life. Elario Dalmas II is an engineer, a writer, and an artist. He might be that guy in the grocery store after work with his cheerful daughter in tow, grabbing something for dinner. He's a hardworking, soulful, proud father who is carrying something with him that no one would know anything about just by looking at him. And that story is what he's going to share with us today. My listeners should be aware it is sad. So you may want to have a box of tissues nearby. Welcome, Elario, to the show.
Thank you for having me, Mitzi. It's great to be here.
I want to do a little bit of foreshadowing with my first question. So it's going to be a strong one for my listeners and for you. What do we get wrong as a society in the way we deal with death?
I think it's really that we shy away from it and think it's a subject that's taboo. We treat it as something that we don't want to deal with till we have to deal with it. I think in modern society, we've really gotten away from some of the thinking like the Victorian age and the Edwardian age had, that death is part of life. And it's something that you just have to deal with. And it's something that you should really plan for and not scramble at the last moment when something goes completely sideways on you. It makes it an easier experience if that experience can be said to be anything close to easy. But I think dealing with it as the circle of life, if you will, to bring in that kind of a reference, it's just the next step in your life, if you will. I have Christian values, so I believe in heaven and that we continue to exist after we go. And by that same token, the love that you have for someone and the love that they have for you, I don't think it really goes away. It's just, it doesn't have the same kind of expression that you did before. Because if anything, I think grief, a lot of people talk about grief being emptiness. And I think it's almost being over full. You don't have an outlet for that love to flow through. And it's finding your new normal to deal with that, I think.
Wow. Yes, beautifully explained. Thank you. And we're going to get into your experiences, but I would like to start out by asking you a couple of questions about your life. What kind of family experience did you have growing up?
I thought it was a normal experience when I was going through it as a child. And looking back through the lens of adulthood, it was anything but normal. I had a very demanding father who was abusive. And basically, it did some good. It gave me my work ethic and gave me that drive in life to really go after things that I thought were important. But it made things really tough in some respects too. The abuse itself was tough, and I did counseling for that in my teens after my parents had divorced, and came to terms with a lot of it and started healing from some of that stuff. But then later life events tore those scars open, and I like to say tore the doors off of rooms that I thought were finished and closed. So yeah,
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Are we talking about physical abuse?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And in some respects, I think the system failed myself and my sisters a bit, but came through it stronger. And that's what I like to look at it as.
Yeah, I think that even the worst situations can offer a positive. They can offer a silver lining. And that is also a way of coping with difficult situations, to find that there is something in it that has had a benefit, even the most horrible things. So, what's your advice to somebody who's experienced abuse in their childhood? What's the thing that helped you the most to cope with it?
I think a lot of the guided healing that I had with the counselor, because basically you really have to put the work in yourself. No one can do it for you. Um, so that was a lot of it, but it's a lot of learning to look inside, getting in touch with your feelings. And as a guy, that's something that's completely alien, at least from the culture that I grew up in with Gen X and everything. So yeah, it was a journey, and I thought a lot of that journey was done, and there's a lot more to go. It's never done.
Mm.
You've never arrived with anything in your life. Life's a journey.
It's a process, it's ongoing. And I
Yeah.
know everyone, wants that comfort of closure, but we really don't often get closure. And like you said, it was such a good point you brought up, that you said you thought that you had closed those doors to those rooms, and then something else happens in your life and it can throw those doors wide open again. This is ongoing. Such a good point. So, how does your experience as a child influence your role as a father today?
The mix of Gen X and then having the physical abuse and the never being good enough mentality. I've tried to cultivate that my daughter is good enough and that she's smart and that she's important and she matters and her opinion matters. And I talk to her in vocabulary as an adult. I use the larger words. I don't water it down. And that surprises people of how large her vocabulary actually is. I think it's quite beneficial.
Absolutely. Yes. There's a lot of studies about that, the use of kind of baby talk, and how actually speaking to your children as if they're humans has a lot of benefits. Oh my goodness. So, as you were growing up, you mentioned you started to resolve this in your teens, which is very good. That's early enough, right? So, what kind of teen were you? Can you tell us a story to characterize your teenage years?
To quote Johnny Cash, I was the man in black. I very much wore black, complete head to toe, t-shirts, pants when I could. Now, it wasn't that I didn't do pops of color, and I wasn't afraid to go into other colors. One of my favorite shirts was a tie-dye black and pink, that kind of stuff. But I was very quiet, introspective. In fact, even as a younger child, I was very quiet. My aunt and uncle were always very concerned that I didn't talk a lot. In fact, they had actually suggested to my mother that I should be tested for autism. And I didn't go along that journey until later in life when I had seen a program about a another engineer who was saying that he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome and how he had actually coped with everything all through his life and what his mechanisms were and to learning to interact properly and look people in the eye and everything. And I went, that is completely me. Now, of course, I haven't been diagnosed, but I think I'm neurodivergent, at
Yeah.
least in those regards. I had to learn how to interact. I was very awkward as a kid and even as a teenager, up into my 20s even. My wife actually helped a lot with learning proper behavior and learning to take social cues better. And it was a whole process.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It says a lot about your character to recognize those traits in yourself. Did it feel comforting to have an explanation?
Oh, it did, because I always had this feeling of I never fit in. As a kid, I was bullied a lot, and but I was always able to turn that around. I ended up making friends of all my bullies,
Mm.
and they actually ended up being good friends. So that in itself was a positive thing for me. But with the issues with my father, looking back on it, I could see that I had a lot of depression as a child and as a teenager. And now I can recognize that when I was able to just get through the grief, I was able to see when I was in deep depressions.
Mhm.
Um, so it's not a new experience for me. It's where I've lived off and on throughout my life.
Wow. So you did end up going to college and
Mm.
obviously got your degree to become an engineer. And I'm very curious, you mentioned that you had a wife, and I would like to know, when did you meet your wife, Dina?
Yeah, it was an interesting thing. My wife actually had started at the county with my mother, and they worked together, and I had a thing for redheads. And my mom knew this, and she's, there's this cute little redhead who started working, and you should come in and have lunch with us. And I just, no, that's being complete creep level. I can't do that. I completely resisted that along the lines. And then my mother had actually invited her to help us move, so I ended up meeting her then, and then we actually went out that night. Then I had asked her out amidst all the chaos of moving, and I tend to be a very focused person. So when I was doing moving, I was doing moving. But she was very surprised when I asked her out because she actually stopped in the middle of the street walking back to her car, wondering if I was talking to her, if I was talking to someone else. So it was fun.
Oh, I
Um,
love the way you're smiling as you remember that. How old were you?
oh gosh, I was in my mid-20s. I think I was like 26, I want to say.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was a while. We dated for 3 years. I knew, as odd as it sounds, I knew when I first met her that I wanted to marry her.
Mm.
It was one of those, I just knew that she clicked with me.
Mhm. What was the thing that kind of made you know that? What would she do that you loved?
She was a very bubbly personality. She was very extroverted, very happy all the time. She was just able to bring out that joy in me. And that was something that I had trouble doing myself. I could
Mm.
not find the joy. I was just very good at working on things and working towards goals and just existing. And that's not a good way to live life.
No, but she was able to bring that out in you.
Yeah. And then she helped me connect with that. And like I said, she had helped me grow with my interpersonal skills and trying to take social cues and just a lot of things.
She sounds like a very empathic and compassionate person.
Yeah. When we actually had her funeral, uh, the line was out the door and down the block, and they couldn't find enough spots for cars. And there was um, previous judges and coworkers who actually flew in from out of state to come and pay their respects. That says a lot about who she was.
I'm sorry. And for the listeners, obviously Dina is no longer here. So we're going to talk a little bit about their story because this is really it's really important for people to understand the journey that Dina and Ilario had before she passed and also Ilario's journey as a widower after she passed. So I know that you shared with me previously that you did not think that you and Dina would be able to have children.
Yeah, it was early on that we decided that we're going to try for children. Um, we were settling down. I was finishing up school. And I like to joke that college was the best 10 years of my life because I did 2.5 degrees. I had started out as computer science, and then I did electrical engineering. And then I decided that mechanical engineering was a good thing to do too. But I didn't get the computer science degree, which is what I had thought that I would actually do in life, but all tied together. But yeah, we didn't think that we would be able to have kids after trying for a while. And we had decided that we were just going to be okay with that, moving into the grandparents phase early, where you get to enjoy all the nieces and nephews and spoil them like grandparents.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And so, what age did you get married?
It was in, let's see, 2002. So what was that, 2027? Am I doing the math right in my head? It's early in the morning. And
Somewhere around there. Okay.
but
So
yeah,
you were in your late 20s. It's not
yeah,
long after you met. You said you dated for 3 years and then you
yeah,
got married.
yeah.
Okay. So I just want to set the timeline for how old you were. So you decided at that age, you probably weren't going to be able to have kids. You were okay with that. So then at what point did you decide to try to have children and why?
And that was the interesting thing. It wasn't that we tried to have children, it was that we had a happy little accident. And that was back in the end of 2016. We found out that we were pregnant. It was like right in January that we started doing all the pregnancy care and everything and going into the first trimester. And we had a few bleeding incidents and some scares, and we thought everything was going to go well. We thought we were going to get to enjoy the normal process and have a child to enjoy.
But that didn't happen.
No, it everything went sideways right at the end of the first trimester. In the first trimester, my wife had gotten a really bad, I think it's cold, and they weren't able to put her on medication because of the pregnancy. So she ended up having to suffer through that almost, gosh, it was a good 2, 3 weeks. And that's a lot of the first trimester when the development is very key. So that's why they really didn't want to do any medications. They just wanted to let it run its course. And I don't know if that played into anything, but we found out at the ultrasound that we were supposed to be figuring out if it was a boy or a girl, that everything was not looking good. And we did find out it was a boy. We had named him Samuel after one of my great grandfathers, but also because Samuel was given back to the Lord, and we knew that's where he was going to end up going.
Wow, that is very sad. I'm sorry to hear that, Ilario. But I know that you have mentioned the cultural perceptions we have around death, but you've also mentioned to me the cultural perceptions we have around pregnancy and how there tends to be this superstition of not wanting to announce the pregnancy too soon, just in case something happens. So, how did that play into your pregnancy with Samuel?
We didn't follow the traditional route. We let everyone know before that fateful ultrasound, and it worked for us because then we had people along the grief process. And it's an odd thing to be grieving for someone before they die. Samuel was born. He lived for an hour and 39 minutes. So we ended up having palliative care through the hospital. We didn't want them to try and do everything to save him because we knew it wasn't going to be a scenario that could actually be won.
Yeah.
So we had family all there, and that whole scenario is just, it worked out good for us telling everyone early on because then we didn't have to go through it in secret and our own pain. We had other people to share that load with along the way.
Yes, that is an excellent point for people who are on the fence about whether or not to share. The idea of having a support system there for you because people understand that it's a process and things can happen. And so it must have been very comforting to have those people around you.
Yeah, it really was. And it's odd too, because culturally you think that someone that you haven't even met yet, that's an odd thing to be grieving a child. And then it's even more surreal to be doing it while they're still in utero and they're still alive. We did funeral planning. We actually went to the cemetery and we actually purchased a family plot with him in tow. It was just surreal.
You were taking care of him
We were.
even before he was born.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after you lost Samuel, what was your decision about moving forward and trying again?
We went through a sort of, I like to call it a fog time period. We were just so heavy in grief. Every grief is different, but it wasn't so much mourning the years of connection and that loss. It was mourning all of the best laid plans of a parent, what you wanted for your child, the years that you were planning on having, all the moments. And it was where our grief was rooted. So for a good year and a half, we didn't really do a lot. But then after we came out of that, we decided that, you know what, we're going to try. We're going to see if we can figure out what's going on and try. We also did have Samuel genetically tested, and he was perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong with him genetically.
Wow.
So we would have felt in our hearts if we didn't go down that path and try to at least find some answers. But in the end, we didn't really get any solid answers out of that. But at least we have the comfort of that we did look at that. And that helped with the later journey with trying to figure out why we couldn't have children. And we went down the road of having all the testing that we could, at least the stuff that was reasonable in cost, because it does add up. And here in Pennsylvania, that's not really a covered thing. They will cover some things, but not everything. So it gets to be a large out of pocket expense that you have to run as you're going. And a lot of people don't realize that.
Wow. All right. So yeah, the fertility journey is intense. How do you think that experience was different for you as a father than it might be for the mother?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't necessarily speak of all of what was inside of my wife's head. Obviously, we talked a lot. But as a father, I had decided that, and just like my wife had decided that she wanted to be a mother, I decided I wanted to be a father. I wanted to go through all that experience. And it was there again, it was surreal. I like to drop to that word a lot. It was
Mhm.
just an odd experience, things that you wouldn't normally think are issues that you run into. Just like just trying to squeeze doctor's appointments in between work and the amount of time that you can take off of work and not blowing through all your vacation or PTO time. And then the weight of tests and trying to navigate all of the results with the doctors and try and figure out paths. We actually tried IUI first, and we ended up having Mary. She was a trisomy 13 baby. She was conceived, somewhere after Thanksgiving, and then she passed right before Christmas. And then we decided to go down the IVF route, but we didn't go down the IVF route the normal way. I didn't even realize it was a possibility. It's IVF adoption that we actually ended up doing. I like to call it a grow your own adoption. But we went down that road. We had three in our clutch, is what they call it, three embryos that were all deemed to be healthy and good. And the first one didn't implant. And there again, we said, this is a human being. They deserve a name. So that was Evan. Then we had the next one actually resulted in a good pregnancy, and that was my daughter. And that was a good journey. That was actually getting to experience the normal joys of pregnancy. That was a nice journey.
Oh, that's wonderful. So you were went through a totally normal pregnancy and then had a daughter.
Yeah, there were complications too. We were a little bit older. They throw around the term geriatric pregnancy, which is always an odd thing to hear. But she had, with Samuel, she had to manage her blood sugar, she had to manage her blood pressure. And so they already knew that going in with Evelyn, and they got her on the medications earlier. And it was pretty good. We still had some issues of bleeding, but that just seemed to be the way Dina's body just worked for pregnancy,
Mhm.
because there weren't any issues. And it was really nice to have that experience. And then we had one left in our clutch. So we let Evelyn grow up a bit and thought that this other human being deserves a shot at life.
Yeah. So can you talk about that journey with the third embryo?
Yeah. So we had John implanted and he took, and it was looking like Evelyn's pregnancy. It was looking like it was going to go well. And everything was good in the first trimester. And we were heavily monitored in the first trimester, and then hit the second trimester and we're not as heavily monitored. And then we went in for one of the later visits. I think it was at 20 weeks. I think it was 20 weeks, and we didn't have a heartbeat. So it was a an unexpected twist to that journey.
Yeah. So you were faced with another decision. You had to figure out how to deal with the loss of this child.
Yeah, we with Samuel, we had been through grief share, and we had been through counseling through our church. Um, has counseling staff that are accredited and licensed and all that good stuff. So we're really blessed with that. And there again, we had the support structure come in with friends, family, but it was surreal too. We knew that we had lost John. It was right around tax time. We had some things that we had to finish up at work. So we actually went in that day after we realized we lost John to just finish up that Thursday, taking off Friday, get everything in order in our offices. We actually stopped at H&R Block to sign our taxes. And then we were moving into the weekend there that we were going to have a procedure to, expedite the delivery because her body still thought she was pregnant.
Mm,
So she didn't have a miscarriage or anything. She just um, continued to carry him. So we had to start the birthing process, and I don't remember what they call them, but they're seaweed sticks that help start dilation and everything. And so we had that process started over the weekend, and then she was going to go in Mondays when we were scheduled. And there early, we dropped Evelyn off at her grandparents and got there really early. The sun was coming up, and had to sit around and wait a while for surgery. And then she was moved into the schedule there. I guess they had some emergency surgeries that they had to do ahead of time that bumped the schedule a bit. But the one thing that I'm very grateful of is that when my wife was being wheeled out of the room, she said, "Come over here and make sure you kiss me." And so I did, and then went out to the waiting room, and worst day of my life. Sat in the waiting room and was retrieved from the waiting room by a chaplain. And I knew that couldn't be good. And I had just assumed that maybe some perforation happened, that there was an infection or complications or something like that. I had never expected that she would have passed away on the table.
I'm so sorry. So you lost John and then also Dina.
And that, if you think of Samuel's grief as being spread over like a year and a half, with Dina, it was very front loaded. That was deep depression for those first few months. It was a struggle just to take care of myself, get Evelyn ready, and to go to work. I was off for 2 weeks. And that's another thing as a society we have odd is that you're given leave from work for a lot of times it's only a few days.
Yeah.
And that's a huge life change event.
Yeah.
And then you're expected to come back. My boss was very accommodating and said, I'll pay for leave for 2 weeks. We're not even going to chew it out of your PTO time. But I work for a startup. I am most of the company.
Mm.
So I couldn't leave everything go for a long period of time. I couldn't take a month or two off.
Wow. So, how old was Evelyn?
She was two.
She was
When
2.
she had just turned two when Dina had passed.
How in the world did you explain this to your 2-year-old child when you yourself were barely holding on?
It was tough. And it was learning to speak to her uh, level of understanding as well. And so with children, you have to be very concrete. You can't say, Mommy's up in heaven. You have to explain it in terms that they can understand. And I was able to find some assistance with some of that. So it was Mommy's body stopped working. It's like your toy when the battery runs out. Um, but we can't put new batteries in Mommy. Her body's not going to work anymore. But who she is, the essence of your mommy, is in heaven with Jesus. And someday we'll see her again. She still exists and she still loves you and she'll still feel your love.
Mm, yeah. Wow. I know that you have a lot of things to say about the system and what happens when a person passes away and the bureaucracy that's involved and having to deal with all of that at the same time as having to find yourself alone and figure out life now as a, a person without a wife and also as a father to a very young child. So, what are some of the places in that journey that you found the most difficult that you could help people to maybe think about in case they were to run into this or a similar situation?
Yeah, I think the thing that was unexpected for me is that as a child develops, their understanding develops. So along that journey, it was constant re-asking and seeking deeper understanding while I was on my own grief journey. And that's the other thing that I find ironic too with like grief share. I knew you're not supposed to do major life event changes, but everything changes irreparably. Like I was saying to a lot of friends and family, like 20 plus years of hopes and dreams and plans that were all in stages of execution were just thrown away in that instant. And it brought into question by now. So it accelerated a midlife crisis a bit.
Wow. I can't even imagine all that you had to go through. Not only just the logistics of things and actually figuring out what to do, how to go on with life, the emotional strain, and the way that you are, it's just so inspiring the way that you are so thoughtful about how you handled things with Evelyn, how you went about picking up the pieces. You really think through these things.
I try to. That's always been one of my things is I'm a planner.
Mm,
I've always been a planner and I've always liked the idea of planning before planning. So I knew what I needed. And I was always planned to the level of backup plans as well. So I planned for it to go well. And then I planned for A, B, C, D, and E if it didn't. And I had contingencies to fall back on and routes to go. And that sort of falls into I don't think I've really ever failed. I've just wiggled on my path in the flow to
mm.
find things and do things.
But you didn't expect to be losing Dina in that moment. So, what was one of the hardest things that you had to deal with that you didn't plan for?
We planned for a lot. I always thought, with being an engineer and statistics and having all of that stuff, men usually die first.
Hmm.
I had always thought that she was going to be the one that was going to be picking up the pieces after I died, and always tried to plan that. And always, we had lots of conversations about remarrying, and we had conversations about finances, and we were cross trained, if you will, on everything. We all knew how to do everything in the house. So that was part of our training, if you will, and our planning, because she knew how to mow the lawn. She knew how to do some basic service on household machinery and everything else. She knew how to do the checkbook and where the finances were and how to manage everything. We planned out everything with life insurance, and in our investment advisor, we were planning out retirement. We had our own business. We did stained glass and art, and we had business plans in place, and we tried to do everything to the nth, so that each of us loved and needed the other one. But should something happen unexpected, we would be able to pick up the pieces and move on and live, and not be completely incapable of sustaining life.
So you did have a lot of plans.
Oh, yeah. That goes back to the whole thing with the Victorian. We were very much into, this is part of life. Why wouldn't you plan for it?
Now, did that start with the loss of the first child, Samuel?
That really accelerated a lot of it. When we knew Samuel wasn't going to be a healthy birth, we went and did our wills. We did power of attorneys. We did all of the legal stuff that we were supposed to do. We made sure that we had our life insurance in order. We made sure that we had all of our beneficiaries correct on, like, bank accounts and automobiles that we had. We tried to have our names, and we tried to have all of our paperwork stored and organized. And we tried to have all of that in order. That really accelerated our thinking a lot.
So it made it a little bit easier to have some of that in place.
Yeah, it would have been a horrible, even worse of an experience, if we didn't have all of that in place when
Now,
needed.
yeah. So it hasn't been that long.
Yeah, she passed away when she was 44. She That was a little over a year ago. I can't say I'm a master of emotion, but I've gotten into better contact with my emotions and learning to let them come and not fight them, and go. And I'll be honest, there was days where I just cried and cried at work, and since I'm usually the only one that's in the office, there's no embarrassment factor there. As a guy, I usually don't like to cry in front of other people, but I've also gotten better with that. I'm comfortable with crying in front of other people now.
Mm. Do you think that having to explain and re-explain to Evelyn helps you in your grief process?
Yeah, I definitely think so. The books and stuff that were out there for to support Evelyn, in my opinion, there was a lot to be desired with what was out there and available, and they were hard to find. They were really hard to find, the ones that I did find, and they didn't answer all the questions. They didn't. Some of them meshed together here and there, but they didn't mesh together well, because they're all different authors with different purposes, and they all have their own stories of grief too, which is an interesting thing. And with going through that process, I had thought there needs to be something better. And I'd always wanted to write a book with our experience with Samuel. And it ended up being that it's going to have a different ending than we had anticipated. We had anticipated having an ending of two happy, healthy kids and this wonderful life, and it didn't end up that way. So not all endings are always happy. But with that whole thing of supporting my daughter, I had thought, I need to learn as I'm going and try and figure out what I actually need, what she needs, and try and provide that for her in addition to the resources that I could find. And then maybe provide that to other people. I really want to help other people accelerate and give them the resources they need, because like Grief Share is more for adults. There's not a necessarily setup that's for helping parents or children go through that. And that's really where my heart has gone to, that I want to help other people because I've gone through a few different sideways scenarios. And I think my experience and my story can help other people.
Absolutely. Are you in the process of writing this book?
Yeah, I've started writing the book. I have pamphlets together for public speaking. I'm going to start doing some of that. And I have about ten children's books outlined. And I think I'm going to do the illustrations myself. I might not yet, but because that was always the thing. It's tough making a living as an artist. So I had thought this actually fits together well as a puzzle piece. So I get to control the character development and I get to control the art, if you will, a little bit more intimately if I do all the aspects. But there again, it takes longer to do it that way.
It does, but it seems as if that could be a part of your healing process.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I've considered some other books for the regular age audience as well, because that's where originally my heart was. But I had also gone through a bunch of sideways experiences besides all this stuff. With the startup, my friend who was the co-founder actually ended up passing away. I ended up taking on running the entire company, or at least a lot of aspects of it, after Samuel had passed away, and supporting my wife as well through a lot of that. She shut down a lot after Samuel. She was able to just make it through. And I had to support her a bit more and take care of managing a lot of more of the things in the household because maybe she wasn't used to functioning in depression, whereas I was.
I think depression looks different in different people. That is that's a story. It's a very sad but very beautiful story in a lot of ways. You have characteristics about you, Ilario, that are so indicative of the type of strength I think that many people would like to have, and the intelligence and the thoughtfulness and the obvious just love and caring that you have for other human beings, human life, your loved ones, your wife, your daughter, your family, like all of that just comes through so strongly in your personality, your character, your whole being. And at the I think people who are listening are going to feel such compassion for you, but at the same time, they see you as a light, a person who has been through such darkness and experienced so much loss that is able to still shine so brightly as a light for others.
Yeah, I definitely want to be that light to help other people. Like one of my things that I've always liked was lighthouses. One of my, maybe it was my second painting. And I think my one sister actually has that painting up in her living room, but it was a lighthouse. And I want to be that lighthouse that's guiding people and showing them you can get through this. And here's what I did. Your journey may look different because you're a different person. You're coming from a different vantage point. You may be coming from a different faith. Always have wanted to be that person to reach across the gap and say that, you know what, we're all human. We all have our issues. And I just want to show you that you can get through this. And here's how I did it. Here's some of the methodology, but your mileage may vary, if you will.
Mhm. It's different for everyone,
Yeah.
but I think we all look for others to help guide us, and we are always looking for our own lighthouses, if you will. So I love that you want to use that metaphor to be that for others. What would you say are the biggest lessons that you've learned through all of this?
Oh, goodness. Just when you think you're done growing on the inside, you learn that you're still very much not grown. I've introspectively looked back at, I thought I knew everything in my 20s, but that's a common thing. We're all very silly that we really don't. And you think a lot about life and you don't. And I think it's that you constantly have to be realizing that you're on a journey. There's no arriving. And if you have, it's definitely good to have goals. You have to have something to shoot for. You have to have, you have to have that objective or you're not going to go anywhere. But realize that those goals are going to change. They're going to morph. The goalposts are going to move. They're going to look different. And that's okay. That is totally part of life because I was always under the impression of work hard, work even harder than anybody else. When my wife and I were dating, I was in school and working full time. I slept about 2 hours every day. I would a lot of times be falling asleep and drooling on the keyboard, typing emails to my wife. And we would get together on weekends when we were dating. And a lot of times I was sitting doing calculus or ordinary differential equations or engineering stuff. And we would just spend the time together. And it's not wrong to spend time with people, even if you have to do other things. But it's still important to have those together moments to go out, to go on walks, to hold hands, to have shared experiences. But you have commitments towards goals, you have everything, and you have to moderate all that. But you also have to have the mindset at some point in your life with work and stuff. Like I have work and accolades, and I have a lot of things ticked off in my life. And Paul had said, I believe, out of, I think it was in Acts, it's, I count all these as loss. They're not important to me anymore because my goalposts have changed. And in that same respect, your work life balance or your life work balance, as a friend likes to say, is important. You can't go to work and give 110% and come home with an empty tank to your family. It's you work to support your family and your goals. It's not the other way around. Your work is important and you should do your best, but you also shouldn't burn yourself out because I've hit burnout quite a few times and it's not a fun place to live.
That was a lot of wisdom there. The wonderful summation of your lessons. What about your blessings? What are you the most grateful for?
I'm really blessed by friends and family that have been able to be there through thick and thin. Some of my friends have gone through some rough things as well. I tend to have the friendships where you can pick it up at any point in time. One of my friends from high school, we hadn't spoken for 6, 10 years. And then when we got together at the high school reunion, it was like no time had passed. We had just reconnected and gone through all that. And they have gone through all their own interesting journeys as well. Everybody shows the beautiful things on social media, but it's the sideways actions, the deep pits of mud and roots that you're stuck in and that people are giving a hand and pulling you out of, that are the thing that people need to see the most to know that they're not alone.
Perfect. Perfectly said. That is exactly what we need.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. And I really just feel so deeply honored that you have shared this story with this audience. And I'm very grateful to have met you. And thank you. Just thank you. Thank you for being the person that you are in this world.
Well, thank you for having me. It was good to meet you and then to catch up again once I got a little further along on my journey.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it was great.
I hope that telling your story has helped you in some way. And if anyone would like to get in touch with you or needs support or is interested in anything you have going on, where can they find you?
I have a webpage, edalmas.com, because Elario tends to be a little bit difficult in the American way of thinking to pronounce and to spell. It's rather phonetic, but Regardless, edalmas.com. And I also have edalmas author on Facebook and Instagram. As I grow other socials, I'll have them linked off of my webpage as well. But getting in contact with me through there should be the easy way to go.
Great. And I can't wait for this book to come out, the first of many, hopefully. And yeah, I appreciate you and your time. Thank you, Elario.
Thank you very much, Mitzi.